Hi, Jose. Thanks for
Hi.
joining me. Today we're going to be doing the first episode of Bones and Beyond. Today we're going to be exploring Jose Austin's journey to the UK and how he went from being an MS orthopedics in India to doing national training in orthopedics in the UK. So, Jose, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Firstly, thanks, Shubhendu. I think before I start introducing myself, I think the audience deserves to know about you. What you've not told is that you've also been a trainee here. You are an emergency medicine registrar in the Oxford rotation. And that's now the only facet of your life. You do a lot for people in terms of providing them coaching towards transitioning roles. But here you're sitting in the capacity as a friend of mine, trying to help me
Absolutely.
into this. And it's funny. It's sort of a transitioning venture to me, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. But I can only start by thanking you for helping me with this.
My pleasure.
For people out there, he also has his own podcast called Shy for Change.
That's it.
You guys can have a look, and that sort of helped me trying to plan this out as well. So, having said that, I'm Jose Austin. I'm an international medical graduate. I did my undergraduate and postgraduate training in India, did my MS orthopedics, then moved to UK, and I'm currently working as a registrar in the East of England rotation, which basically covers multiple training hospitals in Cambridge, East Anglia, Essex, and sometimes even into London. So that's who I am, and now I'll leave it to you in whatever you want to get out of
Amazing.
me.
Thank you so much. Yeah. We've actually crossed paths twice now, I think, probably in KMC as well.
Yeah.
At some point, though not at the same time. But take us through your journey. Just give us a brief overview of like where all have you been, what all have you done, and how have you ended up here in Norwich?
Okay. And I'll try and be as descriptive as possible because I think the reason why we're doing this sort of podcast series is because I've wanted to. I had this idea of a lot of people do get in touch with me in terms of how I got into the orthopedic training, and there are many people out there who are either looking to explore options or and there is a lot of information out there, but I was hoping using my journey as an example, if it can guide someone, that would be great. I also want to put out a couple of disclaimers before I move on to that, saying that all of this is purely based on my journey and experience. People might have difference in their opinion, and everything's welcome. And the second being, as you can notice, even with the first few minutes, that this is the first time I'm doing it. My
Go easy on him.
yeah, my inexperience stands out with this.
You'll be fine.
But it's with a good cause, so hopefully that will make up. So having said that, so I started medical school in 2008. That was in St. John's Medical College in Bangalore, and I think I would say I felt like I was in the best medical school in the world. I had a great time, so much so that I'm quite still rooted to my alma mater and my colleagues from back in the day. Right through years of medical school, early years itself, I knew I wanted to do orthopedics. And part of it was because of what I saw during my rotations, and also from a big aspect of me heavily being involved in sports. And I felt there was a lot of common ground there. St. John's then did provide me with opportunities in terms of going on exchange programs. One was to the University of Minnesota, where I was in the Department of Orthopedics for a month. And then for a period of 3 months to Umeå University in Sweden, where I again spent, even though that was predominantly meant at clinical virology, but I did get the chance to even work or sort of observe, because you're a medical student, like a clerkship in orthopedics. And then right after that, after finishing medical school, I think I graduated in 2014. As part of studying in St. John's, we have something called as a rural service obligation. And I did that for 2 years, which was in a village in Kerala. And while I was doing that, I was preparing for getting into MS. I was very stubborn because I only wanted orthopedics, so that limited my options.
I'm quite
Yeah.
curious there. Like, how did you? Were there other specialties that you were considering as well alongside orthopedics?
Sort of the straight answer would be no.
Okay.
I was so it was always about wanting to do orthopedics. The question was where.
Okay.
So that is why initially I thought I wanted, when you're naive, you think you want to do it in the US. When I went to the US, I realized how difficult it is to get there. UK at that point in time wasn't a straightforward option. There were barriers even with Australia. But as I went along in that journey, I realized those were a lot of barriers in my mind. And that is what many people have. And that's why I'm hoping with my experience, people will get different ideas on how to plan their journey better.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say, if there was any second specialty which would have come closest to orthopedics would have been emergency medicine.
Okay.
And that is very because, some of my friends who are from St. John's, they would vouch for the emergency department there.
Okay.
It was very good. And that
I might say the opposite for myself. So I do emergency medicine, and and if I were to do anything else, I'd probably do orthopedics.
After finishing my rural service obligation, I managed to get into Kasturba Medical College, Mangalore, which is basically Manipal University. And that's where my true orthopedic journey began. It was 3 years of training of MS. And then right after that, after finishing in KMC, I started off senior residency in JIPMA, where I worked for almost close to 3 years. And probably that is where I first got the sort of idea of wanting to come to UK after I finished with my MRCs. And a lot of that time also overlapped with COVID. So that stretched out my time frame into wanting to come into UK.
Right.
And then I got my first job. I started working at Portsmouth as a senior house officer.
So that's south of
UK, so
right?
Portsmouth is a place which is in sort of just southwards of London. And worked for a year. The people there mentored me, pushed me towards getting the national training number. And then, so I came in June of 22. And then I've now started training last year, which was in 23, August of 23.
Okay.
So, yeah, and it's been great.
So pretty quick. So you came here in June 22, and August of 23 you started national training.
Yes.
Fantastic. And just, I guess, for people who don't know what national training is, what is national training, or what's an NTN number?
Yeah. So, I think what I'll try and expand now is the various pathways into how you can get into do orthopedics in UK. Or sort of let me draw a comparison here.
Yeah.
So in India, when we say orthopedic training, it's 3 years of MS, and then you get a license to practice orthopedics, and then you basically start practicing orthopedics and for the rest of your life. In UK, there are 4 categories of doctors essentially. So after you finish medical school, which is about 5 years, there's 2 years of foundation training, and then there's 2 years of co-surgical training, in which you will have some exposure to orthopedics in both of these stints. Then you go on to become a specialist registrar, where you're predominantly doing specialist orthopedic work, and then you become consultant. So there are essentially 4 grades of doctors.
Right.
In between, there are a few more job, roles which are there, but this is predominantly the different grades which are there. So you're asked about what is the national training number? So when you start a job in orthopedics, you can continue to work in it. So the national training is a period which is basically about ST3 to ST8, what we call 6-year period, where during this time you are taken through certain very specific orthopedic procedures and trained to become an orthopedic consultant in the UK.
Right.
And it is competency driven.
Okay.
Yes, there are numbers that you need to achieve, which is a minimum of 1,800 surgeries, of which about 1,250 of them you should have been the lead surgeon. But you need to able to establish competency in terms of doing that procedure under guidance and being at par of what would be categorized as a day one consultant in UK.
Right.
Which is different meaning of what it was back in India as compared to here.
So many people think that getting into training in the UK is like doing PG in India. But there's slight difference in the outcome, right? Like, so when you do your MS or even MCH, I guess, for that matter, in India versus when you get into a training program in the UK, can you sort of speak to what the differences in the outcome might be?
So in India, when we talk about doing training, it's essentially 3 years. It is a time-based phenomenon, and then there is an exit exam, and after that you get the license to practice as an orthopedic surgeon. 3 years in India essentially trains you to become in what I would call as a registrar in terms of the skill acquisition. And then the journey towards developing the competency of a consultant, is a journey you often have to find on your own. You do your own fellowships and then go on.
Right.
Whereas the training program in UK, it's about as a registrar, it trains you to then become a consultant. So there's a slight bit of difference, and the timelines are different. In India, most of the time when we finish the MS, we'll probably be about by the age of 28 or 29. But essentially, the average core surgical trainee who starts that foray into orthopedics here starts at about 29 years, and then by the time you become a consultant here, it's usually after the age of 35 or 36 or even beyond. So it's a much more longer pathway. But this is based on my experience. Let me try and simplify it for the audience. In India, you've got an intern, and then there is you do your master's where you're a postgraduate trainee, and you go on to do around 2 or 3 years of senior residency, assistant professor, associate professor, and professor with different levels of competency. Stratifying that into the UK setup, I would say when we're doing our MS in India, that would be equivalent. The first 2 years of MS would be equivalent to what they do in core surgical training here.
Right.
What we do as a third year postgraduate in India would be what possibly the same competency expected out of a ST3. When we talk of ST3 or ST4 to ST5 would be what someone as a senior resident might operate in India. ST6 to ST8, the same competency expected out of an assistant professor. This is again based on my experience. And when we talk about consultant here as compared to in India, someone with the skill set of an associate or a professor in India. So that's the difference, I
would say that I think I've had similar experience in emergency medicine or even acute medicine for that matter. So even though India seems like it's a 3-year postgraduate, whereas here it's 6 to 8 years, it doesn't really compare because there's that gap between postgraduate in India till the point of becoming a consultant or becoming like head of unit or professor, which everybody is going through, and here it's more structured. Let's
sorry, if I were to just add on, you had asked, is doing training in UK similar to doing PG in India? It's not. Here, you're essentially doing a job and it has a training number attached to it, where over a period, it's based on an apprenticeship model, where over a period of time, you keep working in that subspecialty, achieving those competencies till a particular point in time where they will certify that, yes, you're now ready to have this, what we would expect out of a consultant. And that is not just to do with the surgeries. You have to have cleared the FRCs as part of this and shown achievements to do with teaching, research, leadership, and management.
And so that begs the question, can I, as somebody who's done PG in India, can I come to the UK and work here without a training number?
Yes. So there are various ways in which you can come, and we'll explore this more in our future episodes. So the first way that someone can come in is if you were a medical student, you've not done your PG in India, one can take the PLAB, which then allows you to get a GMC registration. And then it will make you eligible to take on either FY2 equivalent or SHO equivalent jobs. Then if you have not exceeded about 18 months of surgical experience within India, then you can go on to do core surgical training and then apply for the national recruitment for specialist registrar training. The other way of being able to come into UK is an acceptable postgraduate qualification, which will be the MRCS, which is what I came on. One does the MRCS. There are 2 parts to it, which then allows you to get a GMC registration, again apply for jobs within UK. You will be able to apply for specific orthopedic jobs. Then you either go on to work as a SHO or registrar and go down the training pathway. There are a few other ways in which one can come, and a lot more significant, especially at this time when there is sort of saturation with people, so many people telling us that it's very difficult to get their first job, is something called as the MTI. So there are MCH programs in UK that are to do with Edge Hill University. There's one in Dundee and now even in Edinburgh. What it does is it helps you get your first job. You come for the MCH program. Yes, it is paid. You have to pay the tuition fee, but you're also working during that period, so you make money. For the first year, you work as an SHO. Second, you work as a registrar. So even if you then decide to go back to India, you always have a degree. Or if you decide to then continue wanting to stay in the UK, you can, you'll have something you have experience, and then you'll then take on
A local job.
registrar grade job and then decide whether you want to continue as being a trainee.
Okay.
The other that people can, some of my friends have done, is the International Surgical Training Program called as the ISTP, and that's by the Royal College of Surgeons of England, and that some people can look up more about that on their website. And this is something which allows one to come directly as a registrar to the UK.
Okay.
This is more so applicable to people who have accumulated a lot more experience back in their home country. This is on a tier 5 visa, so there are different visa categories for this, and we'll explore that. You get to work for 2 years. It's more like a brief fellowship, like a medical training initiative, which shows how the NHS works. But because it's tier 5, it's meant for you to then go back and use what the information that or the experience that you've learned here for your practice back home.
So if I'm trying to summarize, I mean, we've covered lots there. So there's the PLAB pathway, there's the MTI pathway, there's the Royal College pathway, there's the ISTP pathway.
So the Royal College and ISTP
are the same. Okay, fine. And you're going to be...
Or there's the conventional in which you come in as a sort of you start as a trust grade, get a GMC, start as a trust grade, and then further progress. Or observerships and fellowship. Very rare as the FRC as international, which is still, you can take it in other centers across the world. People would say that it is not recognized by the GMC, but anecdotally I know of people who have been able to, GMC might look at on a case-to-case basis, and that's one way of you being able to get a GMC registration and then apply for jobs within you.
So if I'm trying to like tease apart the 3 aspects, there's a whole set of information around how to get your GMC, there's a set of information around how to get your job, and then training pathway, and then there's information around the visa situation, which supports different paths, and there's combinations of each of them, which I think you're going to go into in a couple of other future episodes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right now, because
there's so much to cover.
There's a lot of information, and I don't think I was able to sort of structure it all well. So what I can signpost your audience to websites such as Savvy IMG, IMG Connect, Road to UK, which gives a lot of information about these aspects, GMC, PLAB, how to get, registration and all of that. So I think I'll limit our series more in terms of what should and, how can you try, very orthopedic specific, and how you can work towards getting a training number within the UK as an IMG.
Absolutely. I think that's going to be so useful to everybody. I want to just quickly go back to your time in JIPMER when you were done with your MS, you're working in JIPMER, and then you said that's when you got exposed to the idea of UK. Talk me through, how did you come across the idea? What made you start considering it? And how did you walk me through that dilemma of should I stay or should I go?
Yeah, true. I mean, it was more about, I think, wanting to, like I said, yes, I always wanted orthopedics, but I felt like I wanted to be trained well. I'm not saying that the training in India is bad. It was about wanting to explore more opportunities, because right after MS, there were so many orthopedic procedures where I didn't feel like I was ready to start my own practice in a way, or be able to confidently take on patients and say, I will be able to do a good job for you. And I'm sure many of my orthopedic colleagues who are at my stage will be able to relate to that. So I wanted to explore. And I wanted to have additional degrees. And so I started preparing for the MRCS.
Okay.
And then when I did that and I was doing my research, then someone told me about, if you're coming to UK and if you're thinking of wanting to be here long term, the best way is to aspire towards a training number.
Right.
That's possibly the first time when I heard about it. And they signposted me to have a look at something called as the self-assessment score, which is basically the recruitment process to get a training number in the UK.
At this point, had you already made a decision that if you're coming, you're going to come for long term? Because I know many people kind of say, oh, I'll just do a year in UK and come back, or like, I'll go see if it works for me and come back. Did you already commit 100%?
Well, at that point in time, it was difficult. But now, having been here, I think I'm wanting to be here for the long term based on what I've experienced so far.
Right.
And I keep telling this to my wife. I think possibly the only thing that might take us back is, think if our parents were not in good health and we needed to take care of them, then we're extremely connected, to them, and that would have to, will change our circumstances.
Yeah.
But otherwise, just based on work and what we've experienced so far, we will be extremely satisfied with what we've seen. So yes, back in the day, I didn't think. But in terms of if I was going to put all my energy and work towards something,
Yeah,
then
you might as well do it.
I thought, I wanted to sort of explore all possible options.
Yeah.
So someone mentioned about go to the Yorkshire Humberdeanery website, have a look at the self-assessment score, and have a look at the applicant handbook for the
Okay.
national recruitment. So that gave me perspective. That's when I realized, oh my God, these are the things that I need to achieve. It gave me a goal-directed focus. And this was about a time when I was preparing for my MRCS Part B. Over the years, I had accumulated many things in my CV, but now I had to tailor my approach in terms of wanting to make this into a long-term sustainable option for myself. If I wanted to go down the path of wanting to be involved in a structured training program. And we'll talk about the whole self-assessment score and how I navigated that. And that's the information I want to put out there in terms of you plan well. Many people get bogged down by something on it called as the end number. With someone with my circumstances and level of experience, at time it feels very dejecting for them. But it is only one aspect of it. There are so many more things that you can try and work around it to ensure that you will make yourself as selectable as possible.
No, absolutely. I have to say that I think there's a secret ingredient in there somewhere, because there's many people who come to the UK and work here for many years and still struggle to get into a training number. And here you are, you've come in June of 22, and that means that you've applied by the end of the year, sat your interviews the next year, and then started your training in August. So there's something that you've specially done differently from what most of other people that come to the UK do, including myself. I mean, I came in Jan of 2019 and I came via the PLAB pathway, and I got my CREST sign off, then applied at the end of that year. So even though I came in Jan of 2019, I started training in August of 2020. So a bit longer of a cycle. And of course, emergency medicine had a different entry criteria and all of those things.
And I think planning is important. And going back to my time in JIPMA, when you said, what did you do? Yes, I had this idea. So then I started doing things which would help me with that. I mean, we do a lot of research as we're going through medical school and through our postgraduate years. But at times we don't tend to evidence it properly. And even so, we didn't have much exposure to audit. So I learned a lot more about audits. And audit is something you can definitely do. As long as you understand the process, no matter where you are in the world, you can do it. And as long as you evidence it properly, it does get counted for the applications here. For example, because my number was 5 and audits on the self-assessment score, you can get a maximum of 2 marks. But for me to get that 2 marks, I had to have done 10 audits.
Right.
So once I understood this, I finished off 5 audits while I was in JIPMA.
Right.
And all of that, because I evidenced it properly, was very well accepted by the panel that holds the interview here. So things like these, presentations, and because you've done through all those years, so then the end number shouldn't be that much of an impediment. Rather, you need to see there's so much other aspects that you can work towards and then ensure that you get yourself the interview. And once you're there in the interview is 150 marks. And then it's about just planning properly and approaching it the right possible way. And unless you try, if you don't run the race, you don't know where you place. It's as simple as
absolutely. So I guess if someone's listening to this and they've just finished their MS Orthopaedics in India, for example, and they're contemplating coming to the UK in the next 1 or 2 years, are there any sort of 3 or 5 things that you can list out for them to start doing while they're already in India?
As part of the master's program, everyone needs to do their thesis. So look at it from how I can optimize from a single thesis. A thesis needs to be published, and the UK only accepts PubMed index papers. So you'll have to do your research, finding out what journals are PubMed index, try and get that published. From that in itself, you can gain a national level presentation and being able to do audits as a trainee. And in terms of planning, now, if you've decided that you want to come to UK, then I think I would still say the residency program in India is quite good. So if I were to still go back in time, I would still do my PG back in India, because it makes me I feel like it made me a more competent registrar and knowledgeable registrar in terms of my clinical skills. And then what I would have changed probably is I might have written my MRCS Part A when I was a second year resident.
Okay.
And then right after my third year of residency, I possibly right after that would have done the MRCS Part B, and then started applying for jobs in UK. So I could have try and reduce my N number, and then come here, worked for a year, gained my competencies to be signed off for my CREST form, and then applied for the number. I think that would this sort of timeline will reduce that dilemma in the future for a lot of people. And I think based on my experience now, having seen both systems,
Yeah.
I think this is sort of, if I were to offer a cheat code, I think this would be the way,
Be cheat
better
Yeah,
way.
I guess they're both
Yeah.
games with different rules, and you
Yeah.
just have to play them, right? So
True.
publish in PubMed Index Journal, get some audits done out of the way, do your exams early,
Yeah.
and that's going to put you in a really good place if you want to come to the UK.
I think having a look at this, if you have harbored aspirations of wanting to get into the training program, having a look at that applicant handbook and self-assessment score is very important.
Right.
But that's if you are wanting to be in UK, be trained in UK and wanting to be here long term. But there are a lot other ways in which you can gain from the NHS itself. You can come to UK for a brief period of time. The MCH program, gives you a snapshot in terms of how the systems work here. You do get trained really well. Then if you want to go back, there is always a degree that you will be taking back home with you. And sometimes corporate hospitals love it when you have these type of degrees. The other is continue to work within UK and then try and sit the intercollegiate FRCS.
Right.
Normally you need consultants within the UK to have signed you off for that, and that gives you further incentive, and then you can decide whether you want to be here long term or you want to go back. If you've done the FRCS, you can still continue to work. There are alternative pathways of becoming a consultant. It's basically getting on the specialist register. And I have a lot of my friends who are choosing the alternate pathway in terms of wanting to be a consultant. And then you give yourself all possible choices.
Yeah.
So
Okay. But for yourself, it was really, the question was around competence about becoming a really good surgeon.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're getting the ingredients to get to that place when you're here?
Yes, because now I'm a part of the training program. It's a lot more structured. There is a lot of people who are specifically allocated towards ensuring that my training is going as planned. Yes, the path that I have taken is much longer. My own contemporaries back home in India, by this time, have now started private practice and are designated consultants. But for me, it's a different journey altogether. I still feel like there are quite a few orthopedic procedures where I need to feel a lot more competent in to be able to feel like I'm going into a case and then feel like, yes, I'm doing the best possible job for my patient. I'm learning each day, and not just that, the other aspect of work which I have enjoyed so far is the work-life balance. There is a lot more, dedicated time in terms of having weekends off, or you get time off in lieu. And that aspect of my work has also been very important for me. So work has been good so far, and that work-life balance has also been good. So I've been fortunate, but people's circumstances are different.
I mean, we've said a lot of good things,
Yeah.
but was there anything that you perhaps were expecting but didn't get, or it wasn't as you were expecting to receive when you came to the UK?
So I was a little fortunate because the timeline happened quite quickly, but there are a lot of people out there, and this is basically aimed for those people because I know they've been struggling within the system for long periods of time.
Yeah.
Maybe over a period of time they didn't, have that much on their CV for them to be able to try and get into the training pathway. And then there are personal circumstances. You've got kids on the way, and then you've got parents for which you're always in a lot of dilemma. You're here, they're there. How do you go about all of this? Personally, for me, so far, well, you put me on a spot here.
Take your time.
Yeah, in terms of, I would say, I mean, because I'm on a much longer journey, in the sense, I feel it will take me much more longer towards big, so here you start operating independently as a consultant. And I think given my timeline, I'll probably be a consultant only by the time I'm 39 or even 40, for example. But I'll still practice independently for 25 years after
Absolutely.
that.
Primes of
But
a
I
surgeon.
think sometimes that does frustrate me.
Okay.
because seeing how my friends have, my peers rather, have moved on and now um, doing independently knee replacements and hip replacements, and I haven't quite reached to that level yet, but I will eventually sort of get there.
Yeah.
I think that it's basically the time in which I've been. Maybe
Two
it's
steps
the
back
time
to take.
process. Things are
Yeah.
it's been a bit more slow, but that's a path I chose. And in terms of do I have any regrets? Not really.
No,
So,
just surprising.
yeah.
Okay. And was there anything that you were pleasantly surprised about? Like you knew all of these advantages of coming here, and then there were like additional advantages which you didn't expect.
I think in terms of life, I'm a huge football fan. So now I can my timings with regard to going for games and enjoying concerts and all of that's been good. And with regard to work, I'll in terms of for going for courses, the amount of funding that is allocated
Okay.
for skill acquisition. And yes, especially when I go to clinics, it took me a while, because in India what happened was everything used to be the doctor's responsibility, and you had to do everything for the patient, and you didn't know, you couldn't sometimes have that much trust in somebody else.
Yeah.
Here there are a lot of designated roles for what the nurses need to do within the clinic, and what would be what would be the physio's job in the wards. And so when for example, my day in clinic would be everything sort of prepped and ready for me. I don't have to worry about ordering the x-ray before I see the patient. I basically go in, do the consult, come out, give the nurse a plan, they will execute it. My job is to dictate, somebody then types up the letter for me. So that aspect of it has been a pleasant surprise, because otherwise I would have to be bogged down by all that paperwork which was there previously.
You're just seeing patients operating.
Yes, even in theatre, things are structured. Yes, NHS also has its problems, and it's a topic in itself. But at times I feel like a surgeon. I am only sort of executing the job that is sort of expected of me, and I'm not being pulled down by the other aspects which were, had were very coexistent when I was going through my residency training in India. And when we talked about work-life balance, because of the European Time Directive, our work hours are limited. I go to, I think we were contracted for about 48 hours a week.
Yeah, 40 to 48, depending.
And never crossing more than 12 hours in a day.
Yeah.
That's on the worst days. So it's 8 to 5. You go to work, you finish your job, you come back home, and there's no nurse calling you from the ward saying, what do I do for this, or nobody calling, and it's sort of frowned upon, on your own free time to be bothering you from stuff.
No one has your personal number.
Yeah, so that's been good. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So you've gone from just holding the Norfolk Norwich to working in Norfolk Norwich, and it's been quite a journey. And then I guess there's so much in there, so much more information that is going to benefit people through this channel, through this podcast, Bones and Beyond. And
I mean, I think, like I said, only when you start talking about most of the things that we've talked about today are the questions that I keep getting from a lot of my colleagues who are still wanting to explore these pathways. And I think I haven't sort of structured and completely put it out there. It's difficult. There's so many facets and domains to these things. But I feel the more we keep talking about it in our future series, and I think if there are still things which are pending, I can always take the audience through. There'll be a lot of repetition, but specifically in terms of how my journey was.
And we're going to build it together with the audience. If there's any comments or questions, any particular things that you want Joe's to answer, just put them in the comment section, or feel free to reach out on social media handles, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm on LinkedIn mostly, I think. So Shubhendu Kulshresht, or my website is coachwithshub.com, because that's the other thing that I didn't explain. I do. We kind of mentioned. So yeah, I coach, and I'm an emergency physician and do a little bit of quality improvement. And just closing remarks. What have I not asked you yet that you would like me to ask you?
We had kept this particular first episode more of an IMG perspective into orthopedic training in UK. and the focus was more about people who are wanting to explore.
Yeah.
For medical students and people who are doing their MS or even finished with their MS, what is out there for further training within the UK. I think we've covered most of those aspects. I think in the next session, what we might do is go into more specifics of how to work towards a national training number and life as an orthopedic trainee. Now that you put me on the spot with regard to some of your questions, it's given me some food for thought.
Okay.
And I will then possibly talk more about what my day as a trainee looks like.
I'm sure people would love to
What are
hear
the
about that.
advantages and
Yeah.
disadvantages, explore more into that, maybe deal with more specifics of how do you address things in the portfolio. We'll talk a bit more about the interviews, and if there are still shortcomings after that, then maybe in a future episode I can take people through, maybe put my laptop and screen share and take them through what my portfolio looked like and how that can possibly help others in terms of organizing the evidence. And yeah, the aim is, I was quite fortunate to have been in this position, and the whole intention of this was to try and help as many people as possible in whichever way I can, to if they have dreams of aspiring to get a training number, essentially.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So if that's you, hopefully by now there's another video somewhere on the screen which you can look at. So on YouTube, and if you're listening to a podcast, hopefully the next podcast episode will be out simultaneously. So yeah, thank you very much. This was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you for helping me out with this.
No, my pleasure.
If you got any questions, we can possibly bring it up during future episodes as well.
Sounds good.